Hey y'all, James Roy here. Before we start this podcast, I'd like to issue a trigger warning. While our podcast is pretty light on these topics, the movie Last Night in Soho features the topic of suicide, sex trafficking, and abuse, among other things. And if these are not your cup of tea or if these might trigger you, then I would recommend against watching this movie. Hey y'all, I'm James Roy. This is my lovely wife, Courtney,
Hello.
aka the love of my life. And we're here to talk about movies with you. That's what we do here.
Let's do it.
This is the Noise Date Night Edition, a podcast where we talk about our weekly date nights to include a movie review of our weekly movie selections. So let's get into it. This week we watched Last Night in Soho. But before we get into that, we'd like to do our introductory bit where we do small talk because that's what we do. We're considering changing it up, but for now, that's where we're at. Small talk.
Here it is.
The biggest small talk you've ever heard.
And that was it.
So this weekend we had Harvest Festival, put on a whole festival for several people, where we had a big blow up and
several
people. It was a lot of people there, I thought.
Underselling it.
I thought there was a lot of people.
No, we had a really good turnout. It was great.
But all thanks to Courtney. She did all the logistics and the planning on that. I
had a team of people, so it wasn't just me by myself. But yeah, it turned out pretty good.
I was there for electrical safety.
Thank you.
This is really hot. Heat causes fire.
I think that
if I was the one creating this electrical infrastructure, what I would do.
This is a fire hazard.
A free fire marshal. So the harvest night was fun. And then we went trick or treating. Unfortunately, our two older nieces and nephews were down with the sickness.
Yeah, we missed them.
I think it's because they knew that I would give them as much candy as they wanted if they literally
How much candy did
me.
you give them on Friday though?
Legitimately, they didn't actually come to me for a lot of candy, but if they had, I would have given it to them. You would have done it,
yeah.
Every kid that played my game at the Harvest Festival was like, wow.
You look like you were having so much fun.
At one point, this girl came up to me and I was like, wow, you're robbing me. And then she kept coming back and going, I'm here to rob you again. And her parents were standing next to her like, that's not very nice. And I'm like, no, that's my fault. I said that.
Church function, robbing.
She's picked up on my
souls.
Words.
Just trying to meet them where they're at,
I'm sorry that I said that. I regret it.
Do you?
I don't know. I mean, the kids would like miss entirely and I'd be like, here's a piece of candy for your troubles.
I'll eat one too.
Would you like a toy? Every time they missed so I had like the cornhole boards, but they were like throwing for distance. And I told them every time you miss, I'm gonna take a piece of candy. And I ate a lot of candy.
Yeah.
But anyway, we went trick or treating the next day, and the only soul of our three nieces and nephews that could trooper through it was Marlo, and I think that's because her candy intake was very closely monitored. Very closely.
I think she just took a long time to eat one lollipop.
She really did. But it was
Bless
fun.
her.
It was
She dressed up as Dory. It was super cute.
It was great because she had a small bucket, and I think within 15 minutes it was full, so it was time to go home.
Which worked out for us because I got a candy.
Yeah, no.
Did you get one?
I got one.
Yeah, I got one.
I took one piece. I didn't want to make Marlo think that I was taking all of her candy.
Well, she said, "This is for you, Coco."
She didn't offer me any. I slyly took some while she was eating a Reese's cup.
You stole.
I stole.
Wow.
Forgive me, please. But that was our Halloween experience. Pretty low key. I mean, I guess the Harvest Festival wasn't like low key. Not like the Marvel TV show low key, but like I don't know.
Yeah, it was chill. It wasn't
somewhere
like
in between.
Too stressful, but it was fun and it was packed. So yeah, it was good.
But
I'm ready for a nap. Just talking about it.
Me too. I second that notion. But on that note, I guess we'll get into the movie review this week.
Let's do it.
this week we watched Last Night in Soho, a movie set, believe it or not, somewhere around or about near Soho,
In London.
London.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it follows the story of Eloise Turner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean the actors are well known depending on what circles you follow. Like I saw Matt Smith and I geeked out, but I don't. Some people don't know who Matt Smith is.
Mm.
But he was in there.
He's in The Crown.
He's in The Crown. Yeah,
Yeah, he's great.
it was mostly British actors. So
Mm-hmm.
Anya Taylor Joy, which I said Anna last week because I
I'm pretty
misread
sure
her
it's
name. Anya Taylor Joy.
yeah.
She plays Sandy,
Mm-hmm.
and
Queen's Gambit. She did
she's
awesome
in
in
Queen's
that.
Gambit. I haven't seen Queen's Gambit, but I know she was in
Oh
that.
my
I
gosh.
know you've already given me so much, so
Everyone
much
else has to
trouble over
feel
that.
that. Like, what?
I was underwater. What can you expect? Um, but and then there's also so I'm gonna have to look over for a second. Uh, Thomasin Mackenzie
Yeah,
is,
she was in Jojo Rabbit.
and she's the main
She
character.
did awesome in Jojo
Eloise
Rabbit.
Turner.
Yeah. She's great.
Um,
Great little actress.
And so all the other actors, for the most part, as far as I could tell, were pretty low key.
Yeah, not as well known. Not many notable works.
But yeah, before we get too deep into it, I guess we'll give you our surface level impressions. I thought it was a solid movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good plot twist at the end. I think it's one of those movies where you watch the preview and you're like, I'm pretty sure I know what's gonna happen, and then they get you with like one. There's like one point in the movie late in where you're like, oh wow, this isn't exactly what I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no. How did you feel overall about the movie though? I
I thought
thought,
it was good. I definitely like murder mystery type styles. So the fact that it seemed like that's what it was, really drew me in. So I think on a surface level it was good. There's obviously some parts where I'm like, I could do without. Um, but overall, it was a pretty good movie.
yeah, and I know that you're not particularly huge into horror movies, but this is I probably about as close as we'd get to a horror movie.
Yeah, like I said, I do like murder mysteries and I do like origin stories. So as far as that goes, this was along the lines of a mystery in some aspect.
Yeah.
Kind of like a thriller.
Yeah, and I definitely felt like the acting was great. I didn't feel like there was anyone who was there. Actually, there was one role, which
Yeah,
was
the
the
love
the love
interest.
interest. We'll get into that
It
later,
was a bit awkward.
but it was a bit awkward. He doesn't show up in any of the previews. I didn't know he was going to be there,
No, you had no
and
idea she even had a love interest.
and honestly, it was
A little cringe sometimes.
almost non-existent, and then suddenly it was there. I
Yeah.
was just like,
Yeah.
okay, cool, whatever.
He seemed like a nice guy though,
Yeah, he seemed like a nice guy.
like in person,
Um,
in
so
real life.
so this movie has grossed about 6.5 million to this point. The budget was about 40 million.
Mm.
It suffered kind of a Halloween slump. I guess people would rather be trick or treating than
Or
watching a
watching
horror
Michael
movie.
Myers.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm.
Dune was actually the number one movie. This one tied for seventh with I can't remember what the name of the other movie was that it tied with,
Okay.
but this was seventh in the box office.
Oh wow.
And I'll tell you, it's one of those offbeat movies. I mean, when you watch a movie a week, you're gonna catch a lot of these. Is what I found.
Mm-hmm.
Because since we started this, like we've had maybe 3 blockbuster movies, and the rest have been. And the numbers are about the same in terms of box office.
Yeah.
Because we had like Free Guy, Shang-Chi, and Dune,
Yeah, they were like huge hits.
and a lot of the other ones we watched like may or may not have been great.
Mm-hmm.
But
To the majority of the public, I would say.
no, yeah, and I'd have to look. I'm pretty sure this director has another movie that we'd know, but I wouldn't tell you that right now. I just know that in a lot of the reviews I saw, like this isn't his best work, which leads me to believe that he has other work. But I guess Courtney will look it up, but while she's doing that, I'll go ahead and issue our spoiler alert because we're about to get a little deeper into this. Give you the rundown on the plot and kind of get a little more analytical with it. Kind of give you the whole scoop without holding anything back. So if you don't want to hear any of that, you can take a pause and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the info that we're looking for, my lovely bride?
Like something else he did that I personally really liked. He did Baby Driver.
Baby Driver, that was it.
I loved
Baby
Baby
Driver
Driver.
was such a good
So
movie.
good. If
Oh
you
my
haven't seen
gosh.
that one's great. He also did Scott Pilgrim versus the World,
Okay, that one's really
which is
good.
another good one.
I like that one. And Ansel Elgort in Baby Driver, he's got a movie coming out soon. He's in the remake of West Side Story, so that's good.
Mm.
Um, I've got my finger on the pulse of Hollywood. I'm keeping track of what's coming up. If you know what I'm saying.
Okay. Trying to be relevant. I see you.
But I guess we'll get into the plot review. Would you like to recount the plot, or shall I?
He also did the screenplay for Ant-Man, if that
Ooh.
makes you feel better. Yeah, I can do the plot review.
All right. Well, let's get
Did
it.
you outline it for me? Did you
I
make some notes for me?
I outlined the notes for you. I gave you a little
Okay,
guideline.
let's see.
You know how
All
I
right,
do.
plot review. Here we go. Girl lives in a small town outside of London in Cornwall.
Just a small town girl
Just a small town girl
living in a lonely world.
That's right. She seems to have no mother, as it's like vividly displayed for us. So she lives with her grandma, and she gets a call, and she gets accepted into this fashion school in London.
Yeah.
And it seems like she has some type of history of just kind of like seeing visions of her
Yeah.
past, like her mom specifically. And so she kind of has some history of mental health and struggling with that. So it's kind of a big deal for her to go to London. So she goes, and she immediately does not fit in, because it's all these like city type girls, all these girls who are kind of like influencer style and really relevant and really trendy. And she shows up in her handmade clothes, which looks awesome. So she clearly doesn't fit in. She tries to go out and hang out, and she doesn't really click with them very well.
It's a square peg in a
And
round
she
hole
sees this
situation.
random man, and he kind of catches her eye. He's just kind of like, she's kind of intrigued by him because he's just like staring off in the distance, and he's older, like in his 70s, looks about. So she just kind of notices him. Well, she decides to switch houses because she doesn't fit in, and they're like throwing parties, and that's just not really her scene. She's just kind of there for school to be a fashion designer.
It's troublesome to get sleep when everyone's partying.
Yeah. I mean, that whole college vibe going freshman year, and everyone's wild and finally out of the house. And for her, it was just kind of like, it's not really the experience she wanted. So she's coming out of class, and she sees this little card that says, female housemate wanted, female only. And so she calls, and of course she meets this lady, and it's like an older lady, and the lady's like, no boys, no partying, no drugs. And she's like, oh yeah, no, I don't do any of that.
Easy.
I'm good, easy. And she's like, okay, and you're not allowed to leave in the middle of the night. She's like, oh, okay. So she ends up signing the lease and moving in right away. She goes and gets a job at the local pub.
Ironically, moving out of her old place.
Yeah,
in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night, she moves into this new place, and it's in Soho, that little area of London, and it's kind of very vibrant and little old school and vintage, which is totally up her alley. So she seems to be in like a nice place for her speed, her vibe. And so she starts working at the pub, and the old man that she spots earlier hangs out at this pub. Well, she's staying at this new house, and she starts to have these dreams. And at first they're kind of pleasant. It's about like this girl who's gorgeous, and she can sing and she can dance, and she wants to be famous. And it's set in the 60s.
It's pretty much her dream, but like a different career field.
And she's like in this place of this girl, like dreaming as this girl. But this beautiful girl who's just kind of like very vibrant, very outgoing.
Played by Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yes, which is played by Anya Taylor-Joy. And she meets this guy as she's going to this club to like, get a gig at singing, right? Because she wants to be famous. And so they're like, oh, talk to that guy over there named Jack, which is played by
Matt Smith.
Yes.
And AKA the Doctor.
So this is all part of the dream sequence. So she meets him, and she's like, I'm going to be the next big thing, right? And so he's like, okay, can you sing? And so she's like, well, I can dance. And so she starts dancing, and he instantly seems like mesmerized by her. And all these men just kind of like want to talk to her. And so he kind of just like sees her and is like, wow, like I found the next best thing kind of, right? This is it. She's going to be famous. I'm going to make money off of her. This is going to be great. And all the while you think he's just like some producer of some sort, some manager. And so he takes her home, and they kind of like make out, and it's all like in her own dream, like she's acting as this girl. So she finally wakes up and she's just like, oh my gosh, that was so exciting, that was such like a pleasant dream, just kind of like this persona of this girl who's fearless, this girl who just kind of goes for what she wants, and she's gorgeous, and she gets a guy, and so she's just like on cloud nine, feeling like, what's the story that I've just stepped into?
She's essentially addicted. It's like a good book. She's
Yeah.
addicted to
And
it.
so she kind of wants to know what happens next. And so she is going about her life. She's enjoying life. She's, going to school. She starts to design these clothes that kind of mimic her dreams as she's designing at school. And so she kind of just like, it kind of goes through the sequence of her like wanting to go back to sleep and be a part of the story and see what happens next. And so as she's kind of like climbing to fame, this girl, she's kind of getting to meet different people in her dream. And so she's kind of going back and forth to sleep and trying to see what's going to happen next. And then at some point, it kind of takes this dark turn.
Yeah.
She's like sitting in this room in her dream, and it's like all gentlemen. And she's just kind of like, well, this is weird. Like, I'm the only girl in her dream. And so sure enough, the girls start coming out, and it turns out to be, this is more of like a showgirl type style, right? This is not like a professional like singing gig. This is not like a classy gig. This is like they're showgirls. They're literally like entertainers for these men. And so she starts to realize like what's happening. She kind of freaks out. So she leaves, and she's like trying to find the girl that her dreams are about. And she has named herself as Sandy in the dreams. And so she's like, where's Sandy? So she finds Sandy, and Sandy's in her dressing room, and she's just like crying, and she's really upset at herself because it's kind of like she's, sold herself almost into this world, right? She feels like she's trapped. And so Matt Smith's character is still in charge of her. And so he comes in and he's like, you better get out there. You better get out there.
We have another show tonight.
We have another show, right? And it becomes a little violent. You don't really understand the extent of her situation just yet, but you understand that she's kind of in this place of, vulnerability. She's in this place of mistreatment. She's in this place of possibly, she feels stuck. And so you're just kind of like feel for her. So she starts to understand that this is kind of taking like a dark turn. So she ends up having more dreams, and the dreams just kind of get darker and darker. And then we find out that, Sandy is being used for like pretty much like not sex trafficking, but almost.
Just short of it.
It is like sex trafficking, but like in more of a pimp type way of the 60s. So technically today it would be considered sex trafficking because
she's some pretty graphic stuff.
Yeah, and it is pretty graphic. As far as like imagery goes, there's not a lot shown. It is definitely more implied through like, sounds and visions and like blurs. So quick what's
visuals,
happening. Yeah, very, very quick visuals. So it's not very graphic, but the content is heavy. And so she's basically in sex trafficking.
Basically.
That's what it is. She has to perform. She has to kind of seduce a man. And, she gets paid, but her money doesn't go to her. It pretty much goes to this manager or the pimp. Basically, it's her pimp.
Yeah.
And so this is now her life. And so she kind of just self-medicates with alcohol to like get through it. And so she kind of like realizes that this girl was trapped, and this girl had like an awful life, and this girl was being tortured, and this girl was, being raped. This girl was being harassed and sexually assaulted. And so she just kind of feels for Sandy and wants to like save Sandy. Then she has this really intense one where she so she knows like how dark Sandy's life is, and she decides to be social and go out with one of the guys that she meets at school back in her real life. So she's not dreaming at this point. She's back at school. She is kind of like, distraught about the clothes she's been making because she's been basing it off of Sandy's persona. And so she gets asked out by that guy.
Yes.
Right. And she says like no all the time, but finally she's like, I want to go out with you. Yeah. Because her dreams do start to get so much darker because of all the violence and because of all the, the intense things that are happening to Sandy in her dreams. So she essentially doesn't want to go back to sleep. Like in her
so
house.
She's using him to stay awake.
Yeah, so she's using him, and she's like, just help me stay awake. And he's like, okay.
I can help you do that.
So it's pretty much Halloween time. Obviously, they released this movie around Halloween time. It's Halloween, and so they have to go dressed up. And so he's like, oh, we'll just be ghosts or whatever, right? And so ironic. So they put on like makeup, and they go to like this club, and everyone from school is there. And one of the girls like slips something in her drink, Doesn't show us, but So she hands
Yeah,
her
it's
some drink. It's
heavily
probably
implied.
some type of drug or something.
A
And so,
hallucinogenic.
yeah, one of those things. And so she ends up drinking it and she starts like getting all like out of it and he's out of it because they both drink the drink and all the stuff. And so he's like, "You want to hang out more?" And she's like, "Yeah." Because in her mind, she's like, "I need to stay awake." So she like invites him over, even though
Well,
there's,
and at the club, she starts to see
oh, sorry. Yes. At the
visions,
club, she starts to get visions of Sandy.
and
Right. And
it's the first time
Sandy,
she's had these outside of like the house.
yeah, outside of the house. And, well, she's like doing something. Right. So she kind of is freaking out. And so she asks him to like stay with her because she's scared. And so they're spending time together at her house. And all of a sudden, she sees the vision of Sandy, which appears to be getting killed in this vision by Will Smith.
Matt Smith.
Sorry, not Will Smith. I was just thinking
This
about
is a story
yeah,
all
Fresh
about
Prince.
how I
or
got
the
stabbed.
or the Dodgers catcher. Shout out to the Dodgers. Next year, guys. All right. Anyways, so Matt Smith's character appears to be killing her in this vision. So she's freaking out, like screaming as if it's happening to her because she just feels the vision like so much. Right. This is kind of like Lovely Bones status if you've ever seen Lovely Bones.
I've
Love
not.
that movie as well. Anyways, and so she's like freaking out. And so the lady that lives at the house is like, is there a guy in there? And of course the guy's like, "I'm in here, but I'm not doing anything, I promise." And so she's like, get out before I kill you. It's like escalating and it's like really intense, like a mirror breaks. And she's just like, huddled on the floor, like freaking out. So finally, like all these other like ghosts per se start coming out, and these are like men, but they don't have like faces, and it's like representing all the men that kind of like mistreated her
Because she's seen them in the visions.
yeah, because she's seen them in the visions, the men who like she's had to hook up with like against her will, and the men who've raped her, the men who have like harassed her, the men who have gone after her, right? Well, one guy stands out in particular, and he and it's kind of like the same spiel. Like the guy's like, "Oh, what's your name? That's a lovely name." And it kind of gives this like rundown of like how this happens, how each interaction for her happens. But this one guy says, "You don't belong here." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "You're better than this." And so it's like the first time somebody like, kind of extends somewhat of a like, a way out, but she doesn't seem to take it.
She doesn't, but she also kind of
And
calls
that's
him out. She's like, you got to be like a cop or something.
yeah. So she's like, "You're probably a cop, right?" And so it's played by Sam Clifton. Is that his name, Clifton? And he's not credited, and I don't know why. But if you know who he is, you're like, "Hey, that's him." I love that guy. He's from, Hunger Games. Anyways, so and other notable movies. And so yeah, so you just kind of like see how all that happens, and so she's like freaking out. So she goes to the cops because she's like, "I'm pretty sure like I've just witnessed a murder that's happened a long time ago, and this guy is still out there." And she is convinced that it is that old guy that she sees all the time. And he kind of just randomly approaches her and kind of randomly, kind of says things that have to allude that he could be Matt Smith's character.
And it's
right?
really
A
easy to
future
believe
him.
it too. Yeah.
And it is because she starts kind of acting like Sandy in real life. Like she changes her hair. She starts ordering her favorite drinks. She wears her white jacket that she found at a vintage store. She starts hanging around at the same places. And so she kind of like tries to take on this persona of Sandy. And the old man like sees her and he just kind of like, "You remind me of somebody, and just kind of like little hints that he knows who she's trying to be, or maybe she's the daughter of somebody he knew, implying that it could be Sandy, right?
Yeah, and the police think she's crazy.
The police think she is nuts, right? They're like, "Did you take a drug?" She's like, "Okay, besides the point, like I've been having these before."
Well, no, she
that
outright
night."
denies it because
And
she knows
does
if she
deny it, yeah.
accepts that,
And then they ask
she's,
her about her mental health, and it turns out that her mom actually committed suicide. So she does have like a family history of mental health. And so it pretty much makes her, lose all credibility with the cops. And so they are just kind of like, okay, they just think she's crazy. So she's like, "Forget it. I'm just going to find this killer on my own." So she starts doing her own research, looking up articles one by one, like, okay, there's got to be a missing girl article, a missing girl who was killed or whatever, right? She's looking through all these articles, and randomly it's just like a bunch of dudes that are missing. If you'd catch that, it was like Wall Street guy gone for 2 weeks and found dead, or whatever the case is, never came home, blah, blah, blah. And so all of this is happening at the school library, and that guy that she went on the date with, he's friends with her. And so she kind of explains to him what's going on because, they had that crazy night. And he's like, okay, I'm going to help you. Okay. So she's in the library, and then all of a sudden, all these like those men, the visions of all the men start coming up, and they start kind of like attacking her in some type of way. And so she's like freaking out, having a mental break. And then she kind of like reacts to a real person thinking that it's like one of the ghosts or whatever. And so then she's kind of like, oh my
Which, by the way,
gosh,
that
what just
character is
happened?
annoying, but we can talk about that
Yeah,
later.
that's like kind of like her, I don't, what would you call her? Her villain or
Nemesis,
her
I don't know, a
nemesis? Yeah.
detractor. You know how like every time you
Yeah.
aspire to
She's
like
just
do
like,
something in fashion, and someone there's that character in the movie that's like, you don't belong here and you'll never make
let's
it.
just say she's from Manchester. All right, moving on.
Whatever that means.
A mink. All right, moving on. So so she's just like not a nice person. Anyways, so she kind of freaks out on her, and so she runs and she goes into this alleyway, and she's like freaking out, and she sees the old man, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, "You, I know it's you. I know you're Jack." That's his name, right? Matt Smith's character is named Jack. She goes, "I know you're Jack. I know you killed Sandy." And like at this point, she has already cornered him, or has she cornered him yet?
Well, she cornered him in the bar, and then
He like
she's
denied
recording
it.
him.
Yeah.
And then he runs out onto the street and says, I don't have to take this.
Yeah.
Blah. And he stops in the middle of the street, and they're arguing.
And then all of a sudden,
He just gets.
a car comes and hits him, and I'm pretty sure he dies.
They don't
It
ever
doesn't
show it,
say
but
anything.
I mean, you see the gash in his head, you know that he's like gone.
Yeah. So then he's like full on denying it. He
And
knows
they
who
go,
Sandy is, but he's like, I didn't kill
Lindsay!
her. Yeah. And then someone was like, oh, Lindsay.
Biggest plot
She was
twist.
like,
This was the plot
"Lindsay?
twist.
What do you mean, Lindsay? His name's not Jack." And she's like, no, that's Lindsay. He's a retired cop. He's been here for ages.
But go back to the scene you were talking
Sorry
about
for the
earlier
British accents. We
with
just can't
Sam.
help ourselves.
Who's the guy? Sam, what's his face?
Who's?
The cop that was like talking to her in the visions.
Oh, yeah.
It's him.
It's him. And so they kind of do this whole flashback of like, remember that one guy who was nice to Sandy and who really did want to help her, or like kind of seemed like he was giving her a way out? That was him. And so he did know who Sandy was, and he, kind of alludes like Sandy got herself in that position. Sandy didn't want out. Sandy wanted to be who she was, right? And so he kind of like implied that, like he tried helping her at one point, but now he may or may not be dead. We don't know. He never comes back in the movie. Okay, so then she's like, okay, dead end. So then she comes home, and she did ask the lady at one point, like, has anybody died in my room? And the old lady's like, plenty of people died, honey. Like, it's London. People die all the time and nobody cares and all this stuff. And she's like, okay, well, has anybody, like, a female died in my room specifically? And she's just like, like, I just, kind of just brushes it off or whatever, right?
Yeah. And
so she tells the guy, she's like, her friend, she's like, I just need to go home. Like, I'm done. Like, dead end. Couldn't find anything. Maybe I'm not fit to be out here. Can you just take me home? And he's like, yeah, I can drive you home. And that's where his like little like character can be a little cringe, her love interest, because he's like, I've got a car. And you're like, okay, cool.
And she's like, why do you have a car? And he's like, well, I just needed a way to get from
North
London to South London.
which is like kind of funny that like,
Okay, sure.
I guess if you're like a Londoner, you'd probably think that's funny. I've been to London a few times, so I thought it was like kind of funny because like not a lot of people have cars in London. That's a real thing because you can just use public transportation like everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I have no knowledge of anything to do with London, so.
And it's like, not that big to get through London, but yeah. Anyways, whatever. Besides the point, we're not locals, so we really have no room to say. But just judging based of my, visiting, I think you don't really need a car. And I know tons of people that didn't have cars.
But so they stop by the old lady's house.
So she's like, okay, so come in after 15 minutes. If I'm not done, if I'm not out, like make sure you come in and check on me. So she goes in the house, and the lady was like, oh, like, are you by yourself? She's like, yeah. And she's like, do you want some tea? Yeah, let's have some tea. And she goes, so I heard you went to the police. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I just, know that this girl was like murdered, and so I was just trying to help, and I think she was murdered in my room. And she was like, oh, okay, well, you can kind of say that. And she's just kind of like, what do you mean? She's like, well, Sandy did die at some point.
A part of Sandy died that day.
Yeah, a part of Sandy died that day. And you're just kind of like, okay. She's like,
catches a glimpse of the male, Alexandra.
Her name is Alexandra, which at one point in the dream, she said her real name was Alexandra. So she's kind of like, okay, ooh, this is probably her. And she was like, you don't understand. Like, I didn't die. Everybody else died. And that's what I did. Like, they wanted to come and take advantage of me. So I basically killed them.
They got what they had
They
coming.
got what they had coming.
And now
And then
at this
kind of
point,
like clicks, like, oh,
well, it clicks, and
she
Ellie's also feeling a
is
little out of
Sandy.
it.
And she was like, but don't worry. I know you're not going to tell anybody because I'm going to make sure you're not going to tell anybody. But don't worry. I'm not going to kill you like how I killed the other people. I'm just going to put you to sleep. And so she starts to realize, like, oh my gosh, I've been poisoned. So she's like freaking out. She's starting to feel the effects. She catches the glimpse of Sandy's old picture that was in her image, her visions and her dreams and stuff. And she's just like screaming for help, right? And so she's like, it's okay, honey. Like, you're going to be fine. Clearly, like, serial killer status. And then all of a sudden, the boy comes and knocks on the door. And she opens the door. And she was like, oh, come on in. She's just getting her stuff. And she, like, has a knife. And then she stabs him. And she's, like, screaming, no, no. And then somehow Ellie, like, gets enough energy.
The adrenaline kicks in.
Adrenaline kicks in? Sure. Okay. This is where, like, the Hollywood, like, this is totally a movie starts to happen. So she tries to, like, go and attack her.
Yeah, no,
And then,
it's typical. A
Yeah,
18-year-old
it's-
girl probably couldn't do a lot of the stuff that Ellie's
No,
doing in this
definitely
moment.
not. Where the guy is just laying there stabbed and can't move. And then all of a sudden a fire starts. And she's trying to go up the stairs. Probably not the best place to go. This is, in my opinion, where it kind of gets a little cheesy because it was like
Just
really,
a little bit.
really, really thrilling and like kept you on your seat trying to figure out what happened next. And then it was kind of like, okay, now she's evil, but now you have to escape this house. But it was kind of cheesy and like,
Why don't we just get in the running car?
just like that
No,
commercial.
let's go hide behind those chainsaws.
Yes.
Okay.
The house is about to burn and I'm going to run upstairs because heat does not rise. Okay. For the record, heat rises.
She's probably not really focused on the
Yeah,
fire, babe.
okay,
She's probably
I'm
focused
just-
on the fight at hand.
I would feel like the fire with all the old like film and everything.
Well, until they
is
got
gonna
upstairs, the
burn
fire didn't really
fast.
catch.
Okay, it was burning. It was burning in that room.
Also, she's like,
A
oh,
lot.
anyway.
Okay. Anyways, yeah, it was just not really logical, but you're just kind of in it already and you just want to see good prevail.
Well, all this goes up to a confrontation between Alexandra or Sandy and all the guys she killed in Matt Smith.
Yeah, so she ends up going back into her room and the kind of like idea is that she hasn't really been in her room since like all that stuff has happened.
Yeah.
Because she's been hiding all the bodies in the house, which is why the girl was getting the visions anyways. And so she has a landline that can call 911 and like does she call 911?
I think she tries to. I can't remember.
She tries or she does. I don't really know. But then Sandy's just like, well, I can't leave now. And she turns back to young Sandy and, she's like, I can't leave now. Like, I can't go to jail. And she's like, but you need to be free. Like, you are free now. Like, it's over. Like, like forgive yourself, move on. And she's just like, no, I'm just going to, die here. And she's like, so
this
save.
is the hill on
So
which
she's
I
like,
die.
so go save your boy. She's like, okay. And so she leaves and goes saves her dude. And then she ends up like burning with the house, basically. That's what it just implies.
Yeah. And then we get them going off in the ambulance.
Yeah, and then they go off in the ambulance and they
and
seem
then
to be
it's like-
fine.
It's like 6 months to a year later.
And her
Fashion
fashion
show.
line came out and she ended up sticking with the 60s themed, inspired by Sandy. And she seems fine. And she can still see her mom sometimes, but it's more in like a comforting way, not as like a I'm being haunted by my mom kind of way.
No, exactly.
And then it ends.
Yeah, and I feel like we covered a lot going through this, but one thing that I'd like to circle back to is when she first arrives at the college, one of the most annoying characters in the entire movie is her like
Roommate.
antagonist.
Yeah, she's so annoying.
And she's just like, wow, what a gutsy move to wear your own clothes. I'm wearing this. And I'm like, okay,
And
I
she
don't
calls
like
her
your
babes all the
character.
time.
Okay, babes, so let's all take
Hey
shots.
babes.
I'm just
Hey
like,
babes. Yeah, you're like, okay, stop talking.
good grief.
She's annoying.
She's like typical Queen Bee, a very Regina George character. But other than that, yeah, biggest qualm, like I like the movie as a whole, and it's very well reviewed. We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, so people seem to really like it.
But literally the biggest qualm with the whole movie is the love interest. He's
Mm.
just kind of like she's not into him, and then she uses him to not fall asleep, and then I guess through trauma they like come together
They
because
kind of bond.
at the fashion show at the end they're like together. They're
Yeah,
like
she like goes and greets him with a kiss. So I agree. His vibe of acting didn't really match everybody else's intensity.
so it was just like a weird side character that I think most movies would have written off as like comedic relief, but he was just kind of
He wasn't that
there.
funny, so it
Yeah.
was a bit awkward at times.
But overall, I really like the plot twist. I thought the plot twist
I
was great
love the
because
plot twist.
the whole time I was like, that guy is Matt Smith,
Oh,
and then midway through,
yes,
I thought the girl she's renting from might be Sandy, and then they
I
revealed that that
know.
guy was the cop, and I was like, well, then this old woman's probably Sandy, and then I was like, but then how does this explain? She can't be
Yeah, we were
Sandy.
like trying to figure out like if she was actually killed or not. But I guess in her vision, you don't actually see her being killed. You just see her covered in
Covered in blood,
blood. So it's
exactly.
not like, yeah. So there you go. That's
But
just little things to look out for.
I guess we'll get into the next segment. Would you like to introduce it? The Negative Nancy segment,
The negative Nancy's.
which
Yeah, I
is
mean,
Courtney's baby that we've got going on here.
it's funny sometimes.
Sometimes
I
I
would say
think
for Dune, like
I
it was more
overhyped
about the
it.
memes.
I overhyped
Yeah,
it.
but later on, if you can search any of the Dune memes, they are really funny.
Like with the Shrek one.
Yeah,
Oh, that one was great. Or the how you doing?
Dune. Go search them. They're funny. Let's see. Yeah, last night in Soho. Yeah, people really liked it. They liked the neon lights. Like I said, it's like a cool vibe. Is driver, vibes and style, like that dark kind of like vibe going on, which is cool. And interesting and vibrant.
No, yeah.
But just, some people were like saying, this movie is bad. I did not expect a horror movie, which is weird because it's released on Halloween. Maybe it's okay as a horror movie. I just
To be fair,
think
I didn't expect
that
it to
as a
be a horror
film,
movie.
maybe it depicts mental illness. And that's the thing, too. It is more about like mental illness a lot, too,
I
kind
mean, it
of.
covers it.
So I feel like, in that regards, like people who are going through that, I think they definitely should be fair warned that it does have some of those topics.
No, yeah.
It is also about, someone didn't like how it was turning tables on, rape victims and human trafficking. And that's the thing, like these are such intense and heavy topics. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart.
No doubt.
Worst movie I've seen this year. Don't waste your time or your money. Bad acting, bad cinematography, bad directing, literally struggling to watch. Okay, wasn't that bad.
Cringe.
Extremely disappointing. I was not expecting the amount of scenes. The
I was
amount of intense scenes.
I was not expecting such a lack of creativity in displaying your negative opinion, but
Oof.
here we are.
Not my spot of tea.
There you
It
go.
looks and sounds amazing, but with a weak story. Last night in Soho. So bad, it's good. Yeah, I feel like that too. Like it wasn't like on paper, it probably wasn't that the greatest, but it was good. Confused, boring, but somewhat interesting. Let's see. Yeah, and then otherwise, not mysterious, not frightening.
Well, it seemed pretty highly rated. What was the rating? I thought I saw 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, but like, what was?
Yeah, IMDb's at 7.62. People kind of liked it. The Metascore, it's in the green. It's in the 60s, which is not great, but it's not terrible. Some people liked it, some people didn't. It is a different style of movie, which I kind of appreciate, like
Oh
the
yeah.
approach.
I mean, I've said it before. I feel like in the age of Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything needing to have a sequel, it's nice to see, a well made movie that
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't really have any intentions of being more than just
Yeah.
what it
This
is.
critic for Time wrote, "Last Night in Soho soars at the beginning only to crash at the end. It's a broken promise." Which I kind of feel that in some aspects with just how cheesy the ending kind of
I felt like
was.
the ending made it get better. Like to me, I felt like the ending rewarded my time. Which,
Mm.
by the way, this is one of the few movies that has been less than 2 hours that we've watched.
No, which has been great.
Yeah, so that was nice, especially
Yeah.
coming into this next week.
Because Dune was what, like 3 hours?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But no,
But
overall, it was a pretty good movie. If you want something a little scary, a little mystery. I kind of liked it.
What was your score?
It was a little graphic at some
What
points,
scale
but
of 1 to 7?
I would say, oh, I wish I had like all my movies and all this ratings we've done, and then like a visual of like
We should compile that.
this like bumps this one up and this one down, because now that I'm thinking about just the overall movie and I'm thinking about the ending, I wasn't a fan of the ending. I liked the plot twist in general, but I thought the ending was just a little flat.
Well, I can give you my rating. I thought it was about a 5,
I was gonna say a 5 too.
which I think is the minimum you give a movie. Like, that's like right at the borderline of like it was good, but it
Yeah.
wasn't that good.
I'm not gonna lie, I loved the coloring. The coloring was cool. Yeah, he just makes cool movies,
No, yeah, it was solid.
like visually. So the cinematographer, I thought they did great. So good job, color
I-
editing, all that looked great. So I loved the music.
I have to agree. I thought it was nice.
So a solid 5. I'm with you on
Solid. All right. Well, on that note, I guess we can get into what we're gonna watch next week.
that. All right.
All right. So next week we'll be watching The Eternals, which is our next foray into the Marvel universe,
our favorite.
which is always a favorite. I think this is the first time in a while that I've I honestly feel like this might not be as good as it's being hyped up to be. And the only reason I say that is I'm reading some articles, and it looks like the director, she's Oscar winning Chloe Zhao, is already doubtful to return for a sequel. The Rotten Tomatoes score has already dropped below fresh, and the movie hasn't even released yet.
Sometimes when critics don't like it, like the general public likes it.
And so
Or vice versa.
the big hope here is that even if the critics don't like it, is that the Marvel Universe Sheen makes back that $200 million budget, which I could only imagine was the minimum, with stars like, Rob Stark and, Mrs. Smith,
Richard Madden,
and, Selma
Angelina
Hayek.
Jolie, Harry Styles.
There's so many big names in this movie.
So many big names.
1 minute.
Yeah, do you just want to read off some names? Or
Richard Madden, you already said that.
I said
Kit
that.
Harington.
Who's like the comedian?
Kumal
Oh yeah, he's in it.
Nanjiani.
I'm like, I don't know how to say his last name, but he's in it. He's pretty.
He's the one.
well-known.
It was controversial because he got so ripped for the role. That was like 2 years ago. People were talking about that. They were like, "Wow, this is like unrealistic body standards," and I'm just like, "The dude's ripped. He's probably pretty happy about it. He's in Hollywood and he has the money to do that. So, whatever." But I feel like, and I this isn't like my original opinion, but I agree. A lot of the opinions around the internet say that this is literally only getting released because until recently, Marvel didn't have the rights to produce X-Men and Fantastic Four movies, so they needed something to add to the Marvel universe to expand this phase.
That makes sense.
And so they did this. So this is like kind of their next Guardians of the Galaxy type. Like, we need to add something, but we don't have anything that anyone would actually know.
Yeah. No, I get it.
But this one, the difference between this Guardians of the Galaxy was overreceived because it's like a comedy. It was well cast, and this one seems like it's meant to be very serious with some comedic notes. And I like a lot of the actors in it, but I just feel like it's gonna be. I don't know. Marvel took like a comedic turn, and then now they're trying to kind of backtrack and deliver like a super serious movie. Like the vibe of the trailer is just kind of like, this is
Thanos destroyed half the planet,
and
now we're here.
The humans snapped it right back to
why
life.
didn't you come when other things happened?
Where were you when Thanos struck? Where were you? When I'm just like, okay, dude.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. I do want to watch it though.
Oh, I'm super hyped for it. This is probably like next to Shang-Chi is like one of the most exciting movies. Like the only movie that's coming out this year that I'm more excited to see
House of Gucci
than any movie that's come out this year is Spider-Man
House of Gucci.
Spider-Man No Way Home.
I really want to see House of Gucci.
I know you're really excited because Lady Gaga looks like she's gonna kill it. She's gonna be so literally Father, Son, and House. Oh my gosh! But that one will be later on down the line. But I guess until next time, I have been James Roy, and this has been Courtney Danielle, and we've been the Noise Date Night Edition. And like, comment, subscribe, and check us out
Yeah.
on Thursdays we release. So check us out on your morning commute. Give us a listen. Until next time, we'll see you around.